Welcome to PathPulse, Pathology Innovators in Action, your go-to podcast for practical and implemented digital pathology insights.
Welcome to PathPulse, Pathology Innovators in Action podcast. We are thrilled to announce that we are rebranding from Ask a Pathologist podcast. This podcast is dedicated to showcasing the pioneers, the innovators, the movers and the shakers who are actually transforming digital pathology from theory into practical, implemented, and viable solutions. I am Bianca Collings, your host today. I'm the Executive Director of the Digital Diagnostic Summit and the VP of Marketing at Lumea. Today, I am delighted to welcome our esteemed guest, Amanda Lowe, whom I had the pleasure of meeting earlier this year. Amanda is not only a legend in her field, but also one of our featured presenters at the upcoming Digital Diagnostic Summit in Park City, Utah this September. In today's episode, we will explore the evolution of digital pathology, where we are, where we're going, and removing those barriers in digital pathology. And I truly believe Amanda's the perfect guest for this discussion, given her extensive and pioneering history in digital pathology. So welcome, Amanda.
Thanks, Bianca, so much. It's such an honor to be here today, and I'm really excited to spend the next 30 minutes or so with you and all of your viewers and listeners here at PathPulse. And I'm honored to be part of the innovators you're highlighting on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Just to get started, give us a little bit of history where you are right now and your bio, your intro. Let us know who you are. I know who.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I'm really, really proud to say that I have spent over 20 years. I don't know where that time went. It's like 20 years, almost my entire professional career in digital pathology. How I got involved and got going is I started with a company called Bacus Laboratories when I accepted a position as their national sales manager. Bacus was one of the founding whole slide imaging companies. We had a microscope-based scanner, a web server and viewer. We even had some IHC image analysis tools. It was really different back then, but we had it. We were also the first distributor of the Hamamatsu NanoZoomer in the United States. So we did a lot of kind of groundbreaking things back then. And Bacus was a great start in digital pathology for me. They were a really small, innovative company, and I just knew I could make a difference. It was, really important to me that I join a company that was going to invoke change and meaningful impact, and I definitely found that with Bacus.
Let me ask you, did you know when you applied for this position that this is what you were getting into? Had you ever heard, and I'm guessing digital pathology probably wasn't a term.
Yeah, no, we actually called it virtual microscopy back then.
Okay.
And one of my favorite stories that I love to share is that when I was interviewing, they were showing me the scanner and, the computer, and it had the viewer, and it was moving around the whole slide image. And it was a big wow factor. And I still think it is a wow factor, what we do. But it was a really aha kind of pivotal moment for me in my life and career, because scanning of glass slides, computers working as microscopes, just makes sense. It was really clear to me that that was the right thing we should be doing. And that truly continues to be a motto for me, that digital pathology is the right thing to do for science and patient care. It just makes sense.
Absolutely. Getting our technology and the health get to align on the same timeline. I feel like we are a little bit behind with the way tech is. And I feel like the word pioneer can be overused in an industry. However, I would say this truly is you truly were a pioneer. You want to call it that way.
That's very kind of you to say. And, I've just always been very committed to, what we're trying to do as an industry. And for folks that know me and for folks that don't, that's really kind of been my commitment throughout my career. After Bacus, I Bacus was actually acquired by Olympus, and I spent a few years working under their clinical digital imaging team. I then ran my own consulting business, which was really to help the adopters and the industry as a whole with how to make value out of digital pathology. I used to see so many scanners sitting in the corner collecting dust, and it was just sad. It was sad to not see the value and the utility happening in digital pathology, and that was really my driver in developing my consulting business. And then when I joined Visiopharm 12 years ago, it was because, again, I knew that now we have all these images. What are we going to do with them? How are we going to make value out of those images? And so that's what the team and myself at Visiopharm have been working really hard to do for the past 12 years, or at least my time there, 12 years.
Okay, and give us a little background. What are you doing right now with Visiopharm?
Sure. I have, it's a lot of smaller companies. I wear a few different hats, maybe a few less than I did. When I started with Visiopharm, we were only 12 employees. I was one of 2 employees over here in the United States because we're a Danish company. And we're definitely not that anymore. We have over 100 employees globally. So we've changed a lot. But I wear 2 hats today. I'm the managing director for Visiopharm Corporation, which is our largest subsidiary, global subsidiary. And so I run all the US and Americas business. In addition, I'm a senior vice president in charge of our customer success team, which really globally looks at all of our clients. How do we maximize their best interest in how they are successful with the software? And just like most companies, we offer subscription services. So my team's also responsible for a lot of that renewal business.
Oh, fantastic. So as we're moving forward, you're with Visiopharm. This is when COVID hit. And actually, This is where you came on my radar. I heard that from our co-founder, Dr. Matt Levitt, that you were a critical piece of a group that helped accelerate the adoption of digital pathology for obvious reasons. I'd love to talk to us about that and what went on there.
Yeah, well, it's always been great to work with Matt. Matt and I go way back. And so it was very natural for us to kind of jump in together as a team. And there's a lot of people around us to really help to try to make a difference during COVID. And we're just one of countless examples. But, when we think about COVID and the impact of it on digital pathology, it helps to think about what was digital pathology before COVID. And frankly, especially in the United States, we were really struggling with slower adoption rates. And the main reason is there just wasn't a clear business case for it. And this was compounded by lots of regulatory and licensing challenges, and frankly, a lack of real world evidence of how it makes a difference. Another, interesting thing is telemedicine throughout healthcare, even pre-COVID, was definitely more advanced than it's been in pathology. It was not a norm in any way, shape, or form in pathology. I mean, there was telepathology, but that was primarily used for second opinions, international consults, even some surgical consult scenarios. But telemedicine was still really, really limited by IT infrastructure, safety concerns, not as much was in the cloud back then. And even safe use of video technology. I don't know about you, but do you remember when there was a huge issue with Zoom? We were all on Zoom. Everyone's on Zoom from home. And then there's encryption, freakouts. I remember at Visiopharm, they were stop, don't use Zoom. And we had to go through a whole validation of it. And, so the fact is we were all just trying to adapt, right? And figure out what to do.
The entire world, if you weren't ready to adopt, and I'm moving away from even telemedicine, a life in video and streaming and via work, and we're talking children and their education, we were forced into it, and the infrastructure for a lot of the software platforms, it wasn't ready. We weren't ready. It almost back to the car analogy. It's all of a sudden we have a shortage of gas. It's gone. No, I mean, COVID, it would be gone. Like the gas was gone. So you're forced to use this electric car that the infrastructure is not even set up for.
Yeah. I mean, did you ever meet with a doctor virtually prior to the pandemic?
I never would have thought it was possible. But I'm going to tell you, made my life so much easier, right? Because instead of sitting in the waiting room for 45 minutes, right, I go about my life till I get my text. And yeah, but it's true. I mean, so many advantages, but it has to be done in the proper way.
The pandemic completely tested the limits of our healthcare system.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. And like how medical operations were impacted across the globe was significant. You know, but what was amazing is how like organizations and individuals really came together quickly to face those challenges and create that meaningful change. You know, and when the declaration of like the public health emergency occurred, you know, we scored a few wins in digital pathology. For example, like leniency was provided by the FDA to manufacturers like us, really to enable the use of the technology. Laboratories received enforcement discretion so that, you know, pathologists could sign out cases from home, even though it wasn't a CLIA certified site. And, you know, pathologists were advised to use their clinical judgment. I kind of laugh because they're always using their judgment, right? but you know, exactly. But, you know, to determine whether it was a good quality image, to determine whether they could make this diagnosis from home was always up to them. But at least now, and during the pandemic, they weren't concerned with compromising their medical license to do it.
Right.
And, you know, these regulation changes were really essential. And again, the right thing to do. And it helped minimize that delay of diagnosis and the compromising of any form of patient care. You know, that really created that opportunity for us to demonstrate the value of digital pathology and those benefits that, of course, we didn't expect, but we had to, you know, maximize that opportunity.
So it's the perfect storm, really, to accelerate, I would say, the adoption based on this need, and a lot of success. And many companies, you know, talk about industry, were realized throughout that time. And I don't know if we're ready to like jump into the barrier portion before we talk about all the good. I mean, COVID was a very hard time, but there was a lot of good that happened. So we're shifting back into our normal lives, and you know, telemedicine, it's still a thing. Now there's requirements. If I want to see my doctor, I can't use that method every time. It's an every 3 or something like that. So we're kind of now in this hybrid mode. What happened after? As the world regained?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. You know, we took what we could gain from, you know, this unfortunate situation, and we really tried to maximize it. And there's a couple of good examples, and it kind of feeds into some of those barrier conversations. But I think one that's really worth noting is there was a study that was done by Memorial Sloan Kettering, a validation study. And this one was where they basically looked at 1,200 digital slides, which was like 108 cases that the pathologist read remotely from home. Then they went back to the lab. They looked at them under the microscope, under their normal like surgical procedures. And the amazing outcome of this study, the comparison study, is that they received 100% diagnostic equivalency between the digital and the glass side. So this study was so important. So we took a bad situation. We utilized that to grab the, you know, critical information. And that's what helped keep CLIA certifications of the secondary remote sites for pathologists home intact, right? They used that information to show that it was a valid and valuable technology. You know, the other big piece that I think, you know, we carry forward from COVID was that collaboration. So you mentioned how Matt Levitt and I kind of rallied and worked together in that, you know, virtual community that we all started to build. And it was just remarkable. All people from all over the world really, you know, jumped together. And what Matt and I were trying to do was, there was so much need for knowledge on what COVID was doing to our bodies. And so, of course, the desire for pathology tissue samples was significant across the globe. And there was a few different groups, Royal College of Pathologists, the NIH, and then Matt and I were working under the Alliance for Digital Pathology. And the thought was like, can we help create this global repository, get some samples together? And so we worked with the WHO, and they had a framework for their Blue Book tumor classification system that a lot of pathologists are pretty well aware of. And our goal was to kind of use that framework to create a way in which people all over the world could upload samples. The challenge is that sharing data securely, not so easy. It wasn't easy 4 years ago. Still not easy. Right. Yeah. And so, some things worked, some things didn't. This was one that didn't ultimately fully, play out. We weren't able to fully get that infrastructure in place, but people did collaborate. People did share and knowledge and really made every effort possible to help support COVID research. And obviously there's been a lot of important science published since then. We learned through that process, and those learnings are really, really useful today. But there's no doubt, I think you mentioned this, that labs who were digital prior to the pandemic definitely were able to cope with it better, right? I mean, that was...
I would say yes.
Yeah, there was no doubt about it, right? They could adapt quickly and get their pathologists home. They could continue to offer those pathology services in a much more fluid way. And of course, it benefited patient care. And what I'm really confident of is that diagnostic labs will never want to be in a position again where they cannot provide that safe working environment for their pathologists or in a position that compromises patient care. Research labs, they don't want to stop their studies and have to leave all that work at the bench. They want to be able to do things from home. They probably are, as we work in this hybrid world today. And pharma companies and CROs, they need to keep those clinical trials going and those drug development studies. So the pandemic gave us the opportunity to show that digital pathology is essential. We don't ever have to stop again in the face of such a challenge like this. And we all hope we never find ourselves in that scenario. But if we do, or anything close to it, we're prepared.
We are prepared for waves too. Yeah. Heaven forbid.
We have a business case now. So,
did you see, to me, almost like a team of rivals, this collaborative effort, not that industry was necessarily as competitive prior to COVID, or maybe it was, but I saw and heard that it was this collaborative effort where we're not going to focus on who's doing what, who's selling what, who, producing. It was, we're going to come together and figure out what is actually best for healthcare, for the patient collectively. Am I right with that?
Yeah, you are right, but you're also speaking to someone who's a firm believer in that no matter what.
Yes, I know. That's why it's so fascinating to me that you and Matt are cut from the same stone. You really are. Because he is all about, sure, you sell this, I sell this, they sell this, but we're going to work together to figure out what's best for the patient. Oh, they need data. We've got data. Oh, they have data. We're going to come together and figure out how we can make this accessible. And I found that you very much think the same way. And, which
there's a lot of business to go around for all of us.
Right. No, absolutely. And it's got to be for the greater good. And this stone, sometimes, we feel like we're rolling it uphill. And if there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of us doing it together, we're going to get to that top of that hill so much quicker. However, and that's not one of your
top of that hill, there could be barriers, which maybe is a good segue.
Okay, let's talk about it. So you're pushing this stone with this amazing group to the top of the hill. You get there. And
well, I always like to say, digital pathology is a never-ending obstacle course, or there's many, many hills after your hill. There's ups, there's downs, there's loop-to-loops, but it's really a fun ride. And I think, you know, as we just said, after we overcome one obstacle or barrier, the next one's in front of us, and it could even be bigger. And I think I mentioned this earlier, like the barriers we faced 10 years ago are definitely not the ones we face today. And who knows what's in front of us, because there's so many things that are changing around us in this constant evolving, innovative world. But right now, I think there's really 3 barriers that we're facing. One, and I hinted to this in my spoiler alert, was data security, the integrity of the data and how we manage it all. Understanding standards is number 2, and how to improve interoperability. And then 3 is really how do we navigate in our ever evolving regulatory and reimbursement landscape, obviously very specific to the United States, but I think also a globally relevant learning and topic. And if we dive in to a little bit more about those barriers, you know, when we think of the world of data security, it's still, you know, data-driven pathology is still a newer thing. You know, it doesn't always feel new to me being in the business for 20 years. But, you know, a slide that was, you know, 250, you know, megabytes 20 years ago was huge. Now it's tiny, right? And so, you know, it's just a different game. But what I think is really also transforming is the protection of that data. So like the desire to steal a glass slide is very minimal. But the desire to steal personalized healthcare data, well, that's a real threat.
And that's a good visual, actually, because who's going to walk in and steal a glass slide?
Yeah. You can't, you know, but and again, you don't have the context, even if someone did, but no one's going to do that. It's kind of like, you know, if I was going to rob a bank or if I wanted to steal money, I'm not going to walk into a bank these days and go into the safe and take it. You've got cyber, you know, criminals that are out there trying to hack it online. It's no different.
It's very mature, right? The strategy that goes into stealing money. Right. That's a good, really great visual too. Robbing a bank versus hacking into a system. Yeah.
Yeah. And so as, you know, whole slide images and AI data become that part of that patient, you know, health record, it's much more possible for a breach of that data or, you know, unauthorized access to it. There was this paper about a year ago in Nature Communications, and it was interesting because they were really focused on this topic of privacy risks for whole slide imaging. And they did a risk assessment where they wanted to take like tissue samples and see if they could figure out patient information against kind of images that are out in the open source kind of community databases. So they were comparing, you know, existing confidential data to materials that were out in the open. And it was really interesting because they found, you know, it wasn't easy, but they definitely found ways in which they could kind of link it back. And a lot of that was like if there was more slides from the block available, or if it was a rare type disease, or if there was some unique or, you know, characteristic of the tissue that made it more recognizable. And the paper also created like some guidelines, some recommendations of how to like think about these things as we think we're anonymizing, we think we're pushing data out that's safe, but just to be mindful of what are the possibilities that it could eventually be linked back to something that is confidential. So it was really interesting.
So from that image, they were able within unique cases to match.
Roughly. I mean, it's a very extensive paper.
Okay. Well, no, that's fascinating to me. It's like taking an image, plugging it into Google, and having Google tell you where you are, you know, or what that is. It's not that intense.
No, not at all. Because I think, you know, that would be overwhelming. It's just more to think through those questions, to Absolutely. Put a pause, right? I think a lot of what we do as scientists and researchers out there in digital pathology is think through those hypothetical situations. So I really, you know, acknowledge the work that the team did on this paper to just think outside the box a little bit of like, we believe it's anonymized and we've gotten permission to go use that data. But what if that patient comes back into a clinic and then information is then tried to match up, right? And again, it's, and I think we just don't know how data is evolving in this rapid world of AI. And, that word, that's a trigger word these days, right? AI. I mean, it brings up a lot of emotion for people, especially when it comes to like ethical use and concerns around potential misuse or unintended consequences of use. And it seems like every day, new ways, safe or bad or not safe ways of using AI pop up. There was this, I don't know if you heard this on the news, but it blew my mind. There was this case where, or this like situation where an AI candidate is on the ballot for the UK Parliament, AI Steve, and he's basically a co-pilot to the actual politician. And I was like, wow. I was like, what is going on here? Like, I've never seen that use of AI, right? Like, again, we don't know what's happening. We don't know what's coming in the world of AI.
I totally agree. And it's our brains, I don't even think can maximize the ceiling of the potential here for, and I know, yes, in pathology, it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of hype, excitement. I think I saw that's where investors got very excited. Those that did not have necessarily the background, the history of what we're doing. This is where everyone wanted to jump in. Oh, this is it. This is the next big thing without knowing the consequence or the data, the barrier that we just talked about. There's great
healthcare. I think the concerns around AI are really triggered around patient privacy, that informed consent. Data bias is a big one in pathology. And of course, there's like an ownership of data, right? We hear a lot about these data lakes and how people want to pull from all these specimens. So there are, I think genuine concerns, but the fact is that we all just need to learn how to use it responsibly, like anything we do, right? And use it in a meaningful way, whether that's ChatGPT or a HER2 algorithm. We just need to know how to use it responsibly. And I think that's what, we can't ever shy away from, is just understanding that. And obviously as an AI manufacturer, I can say that it's just about using it in the right way. And it's our responsibility also to ensure that adopters understand that. And I'm a firm believer, it's meant to augment our knowledge, not replace it.
Right.
We have unique intelligence. We have real world experiences. And at least so far today, I don't believe that can be replicated in AI, but time will tell.
And those of us on the front lines do absolutely believe that, right? You can replacing this human. And I had Dr. Kahane, who I think he signed out more cases using AI clinically than any pathologist. And he said, tell me the day you're willing to fly on an airplane without a pilot. Like, well let's talk when you're there.
Exactly. Great analogy. And so true. And I think that, it really segues into like, okay, that we can overcome those variables, right? We have a lot of advancements in data management, IT security, like there's so much that's going on there, but it's a lot. And I think there's a lot of unknowns, but we have a lot of great support teams around us that are helping us there. And I think that kind of leads to the second barrier that I want to talk about, which is, standards and interoperability. And I really feel like those go hand in hand. As digital pathology has grown and evolved over the past 25 years, so has the presence of these large data silos. We have countless image formats, right, that have occurred over the years and ever-changing system requirements. But a lot of really, really great work has been done across the healthcare and, DigPath community to help with this. I think the most well-known example is the DICOM Working Group 26, and how they're really working on ensuring that whole slide images can be stored, transmitted, and displayed through DICOM and through DICOM Web to create that interoperable, exchange of information with systems. And there's so many other standards too, like High Trust for AI, HL7, which has recommendations for pathology. There's IHE, clinical and lab standards, and of course, lots of work that CAP's done too. But all that ongoing work around standards and requirements is excellent and needed. However, it's really difficult for novice people to know what to do, how to follow along. It becomes pretty overwhelming.
I was going to say, and in a world where we're required to be consistently moving, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but it does slow us down because we have to make sure we're meeting those standards. So how do you approach that with
I think it was funny as I was thinking about this topic a little bit, it dawned on me that I don't know if there's really a clear roadmap on how the standards overlap, where they intersect, and there can even be standards that are conflicting in some ways with each other. And it's difficult, depending on your role in the industry, to know which ones you should prioritize. It's not really clear, but I think just like anything, you have to try. You have to try to understand. You have to try to learn. It's why I think there's a big growing, space for consultants and advisors in our industry. And it's also why the subspecialization of pathology informatics is growing so huge too, is because we need experts. We need people who can really help guide us, through this process and aid us in ensuring we're doing as much as we possibly can, right? Without creating more barriers for ourselves.
I think there is a growing need, and for consultants. Interesting, because you've left that role, but you probably, because you were in that role, can see it more clear. But we need experts, right? Not just
I think that's what it boils down to. Yes, we need experts. Yeah, and I think I was a little ahead of the curve on the consulting side of things, and that was okay. I think it really helped a lot of people as I took that on a little bit. But it's a different world from 12, 15 years ago, and I think it also really leads into this unknown of how to navigate standards and interoperability. I think is also very similar in my third, which is how do we navigate the regulatory process and the reimbursement process, because there's so many questions and concerns too that's also going to keep consultants and advisors very busy. So it's definitely challenging, and I think the need for understanding there and for learning more is very similar to the challenges people are trying to deal with standards and making things interoperable too.
Yeah, here we go. We have the AI, the trigger, right? And then number two, we have these standards that we need to make sure we're educated and we're following. But the third, we have to be able to make this, it's got to be viable at some point. And that's, what we're really trying to, Visiopharm, you're trying to do that. May is doing that. The foundation, that really creating a solution with those challenges that doesn't sink a small terminal. We got to stay in business.
Absolutely, but we've made really, really good steps. And again, I think this so much of this is thanks to the hard work of data captured during COVID. That's why we have 43 Category 3 digital pathology CPT add-on codes. Now, of course, doesn't mean we're getting paid on those yet. There's no national payment rate. But obviously that's the plan, right? Exactly. Fingers crossed. That is the plan. And what we need is the entire community to demonstrate and advocate, use those codes to show. But that's not always easy too. There's, many barriers that have occurred in trying to report those Category 3. And I remember the Digital Pathology Association talked about some of those barriers, and they're very similar to some of the topics, which is integration and interfacing with billing systems, lack of understanding from leadership, insufficient knowledge around the codes for labs and for payers. And when you have that lack of understanding, the codes can sometimes be over or underreported, which risks basically that claim being rejected. So there's a lot of concern around how we do it, but we've got to do it. And I think that, with the confusion around reimbursement, that's only, I think, added to the continued confusion too around the regulatory landscape. And of course, the uncertainty with the FDA's final ruling on the regulation of LDTs as medical devices. And, that's
sorts of
definitely a hot topic these days.
All the things that keep us up at night, we basically mentioned, but yes.
Yeah, I think, and I think it's keeping some of us up more than others, because I hope pathologists and adopters of digital pathology are, of course, conscious of this, but they keep doing what they need to do, which is integrating digital pathology into their workflows, to keep signing out those cases, to keep working through it and building the right teams to help us break down these barriers. And, the timeline for the, final ruling under the FDA is 5 stages over 4 years. Yep. And that begins in May of 2025. And though there's like a ton of moving pieces, including legal and, political challenges at play, and we think it's the final rule, there's still so much opportunity for change. Right.
The final rule is that like getting to the top of the hill and realizing, oh, there's another hill. We just
exactly.
So is there?
Yeah, and I know at DDX Summit, you guys have a whole topic on this, and I'm really, really excited about that, because I believe that we must all continue to really engage and learn on this topic together, and how we support, labs, manufacturers, and everyone, as we continue to understand this ruling. So,
and that's what it is. Important. We need to understand it does not need to be a fear tactic or necessarily a fear. We've seen people halt the adoption of digital pathology because they don't know what's on the horizon. And so that's our goal with Stacy, who's, speaking. She's speaking, but she's actually doing a hands-on workshop. And part of it for me is, let's get past the fear. And what is the best medicine for fear? It's education. And it's just really understanding what that looks like. What are the next 4 exactly?
Do not stand still. Yeah, right. Do not stand still.
You will be left behind.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Don't stand still. Things will change, but you've got to move forward. We have to take those steps forward. And I wish I could say that, of the 3 barriers I highlighted, like that was it. That's all we have. But the fact is that each company, each laboratory, every manufacturer, we all face our own barriers, depending on where we are in our digital pathology journey. But here's the good news. We can absolutely collectively move forward. Yes. There's just no doubt about that. We just need to make sure we take those steps. I read a book recently, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it's a great book, great book. And the tagline is tiny changes, remarkable results.
Absolutely.
And that is so true, right? I mean, here's the deal. Tiny changes, big difference. And we've all got to jump in. We've all got to continue to take those steps forward, even with these barriers and our own barriers in front of us. And I just want to give a shout out to my fellow technology manufacturers out there who may be listening. We have got to stay agile, innovative, and collaborative, even in our competitive landscape, and really we must learn for each other. So see, I'm definitely a team player here.
I know. I love that. And those teeny steps that we need to make sometimes when you can't see the big picture or what's over that next hill, it certainly makes it easier if we are doing this hand in hand. We are doing this together. We are sharing our learning. And yes, it is a competitive landscape, but there's so much good that we can do together. And I appreciate that. And that is our whole, when we developed the summit with this in mind. I mean, it's no mystery that, Dr. Levitt was kind of behind that too, that, let's find a stage where we can all continue to come together, not just in crisis mode, not just, during the pandemic, but we've got to have a stage where we can continue to move this forward together. And, those barriers do sound daunting, but I love that, that really is the solution is don't stop, keep rowing, or that boat is going nowhere. You're just going to sit.
Trust me, they're not daunting. They're just here. They're present, right? And the only way they're daunting is if you let them become daunting, right? If you don't just continue to learn and to understand ways to move them out and overcome them. So, it's all about our mindset, right? And how we consider this. And that's always been the case, to kind of circle back to my starting story, I just want us all to agree to never give up on overcoming these barriers, never give up on digital pathology, because it is the right thing to do. It is, and still and always will make sense. It's what we have to keep moving forward.
Oh, that is so beautiful, so true, and spoken again. I would say a pioneer, a legend. You saw it so very long ago. You knew it was the right thing. Regardless or not if it's the right thing, the train's left the station. It's happening. And you saw that it was the right thing before the train left. So I think that's beautiful. And I'm really excited that we get to hear more from you, see you again, see you in person at the summit. I'm going to give a little plug. We do have a discount code for our listeners that would like to join us in person. I have to tell you, one of our sponsors, Pathology News, said, it's not a conference. It's like a retreat with a lot of education. It's where we're, at the top mountain in Deer Valley at the St. Regis, and the admission to the summit actually includes your hotel stay, your meals, your horseback riding, whatever it is you're going to do, where we bring people together in this unique environment to collectively move this movement forward. So, for our listeners, you can use PathPulse 10 for 10% off. And again, that's 10% off your hotel, your meals, everything. So it's a beautiful conference. We're really excited to have you there and continue this conversation. I know that our attendees are going to absolutely love you. So I want to thank you so much,
Bianca. And I'm so excited to be there.
And thank you for recording with us today. We're just grateful that you're one of those arrows in our quiver, and for everything that you've done to help this industry. Thank you so much, Amanda.
My pleasure. We'll see you in September.
Thanks for listening to PathPulse, Pathology Innovators in Action. Tune in next time for more inspiring conversations with digital pathology experts.